fact that inflation has fallen down now to 6.8%, the CPI, is this a vindication of Rishi Sunak's economic policies?
Well, of course, we've seen with the disastrous budget that the Conservatives put forward that crashed the economy. We've seen that the UK have had the highest prices and the cost of living has significantly bitten for people. And this inflationary figures today just shows that prices are still going up, but they are not going up at the steeper rate that they were. That is no means for celebration because we still have a low wage, low growth, high tax economy at the moment and no plan really in the long term to get us out of that. Whereas, I'm in Newcastle and in the northeast today to talk about Labour's Green Prosperity Plan, which is about the long-term investment for our national security, for our energy needs, but also about those jobs for the future and growing our economy, which is so desperately needed at the moment.
We'll come on to more of that in a moment, but on the topic of inflation, we're seeing more than a dozen banks and building societies are cutting rates on their fixed mortgages this week. Doesn't this show that actually slowly the economy is starting to correct?
Well, it shows that we're not in the position that we were in when Liz Truss crashed the economy, but it shows that we're still in a very weak position when we look at ourselves internationally. And as I say, the Conservatives still haven't got a plan on how we, tackle the low wage, the low growth and the high tax economy that they've left us with after 13 years of being in power. So whilst the inflationary rate isn't going up in the steep curve that it was, people are still going to see prices rise and people are still going to struggle. And of course, these are bills that families can't get away from. Your mortgage, your rent, your energy prices, your food prices are all costs that you can, offset, that you can't get away with not paying. So it is having an impact on people's cost of living at the moment.
Well, back to clean energy. This plan to make Britain a clean energy superpower, how are you going to do it?
Well, our Green Prosperity Plan is about, helping the businesses that want to invest in the long-term future of our energy needs to invest in the new technologies around offshore and onshore wind, which the government have failed to meet their own targets on. It's around hydrogen, it's around carbon capture, and it's around doing the right thing to be a global player internationally on making sure that the industries are here in Britain, but also about creating those jobs for the future and tackling the climate emergency. We have a plan to be the green energy superpower by 2030, which independent figures show that we would create 65,000 new good jobs. So our long-term plan is one of energy security in the UK, bringing down bills, but also giving good jobs across the whole of the United Kingdom.
Can I ask you, while we have you here, about a case which I'm sure you're aware of, and we've just been covering it here on Sky, Andrew Malkinson, and this is the man that was accused of rape. He was jailed for 17 years. It was known that there was DNA evidence quite early on, but it now appears that the police, the CPS and the Criminal Cases Review Commission didn't act on that DNA evidence, potentially because of the cost of having to carry out extra DNA checks. Are there questions for the Director of Public Prosecutions at the time to answer over this, do you think? Of course, that person would have been Keir Starmer.
Well, first of all, I think it's absolutely appalling miscarriage of justice what's happened. I was shocked when we first had the reports around the fact that an innocent man went to jail for a very long time. But then when we hear that there was a potential for that evidence and that information to be there to release the individual and to catch the real perpetrator of the crime, and that was a failed system that didn't do that, there is serious questions to ask about why that information wasn't provided and that they didn't go after the real perpetrator, who of course was then free to carry on doing these horrendous crimes. And an innocent man was in jail for way too long, and it's an appalling miscarriage of justice. So there is questions to be asked around what happened and why that happened, and what's going to be done to ensure that there isn't other people in the system like that and that won't happen again.
Have you had that conversation with Keir Starmer? He was the Director of Public Prosecutions. Shouldn't those questions be being put to him?
Well, I'm not sure whether Keir Starmer was involved in this particular case, but as you said in your outline, there is
DPP.
there was a number of organisations that were involved in this prosecution and in the subsequent appeal and what happened after that. And we need to get to the bottom of that and find out why this innocent man was kept in jail for as long as he was, when it's pretty clear from the reports that that didn't have to happen. And if a cost was an issue with that, that's just absolutely appalling. And that cannot happen in our justice system. People have to have confidence in our justice system. And the victim was failed because the real perpetrator, wasn't caught. People were put at risk because that real perpetrator wasn't caught. And that innocent man was put in jail for a very long period of time, and his life was completely ruined by it. So this is an appalling case, and it does need to be investigated.
Are you going to ask Keir Starmer about it? Have you had a conversation with him about it?
I haven't had a conversation with Keir Starmer about it. I think the most important thing that we do now is find out exactly what happened and why this situation came about, and why the system failed this individual, the victim, and failed the safety of the public by allowing a criminal to carry on and potentially do more crimes when the evidence was there to suggest that an innocent man went to jail for something they didn't do.
Will you have a conversation with him about it now?
Well, we're all asking the question, which is what happened and why, and that is the absolute right thing to do. We need to make sure that this never happens again and find out exactly what happened, and people have to be accountable for that.
One question that I'm sure you've had a conversation with Keir Starmer about is whether or not the Labour Party supports self-identification, that is, without a medical certificate, for trans people as young as 16 or not. Now, Keir Starmer said yesterday that he would not have blocked Scotland's controversial gender recognition reforms, which, of course, were stopped in Westminster by Rishi Sunak. He does appear to be saying one thing to Parliament and Westminster and another thing when he is up north of the border. Rishi Sunak said yesterday, Keir Starmer has just U-turned on his own U-turn. First he was for self-ID, then he tried to convince us he was against it. Now he's for it, but only if you're in Scotland. Women and girls need their rights protecting no matter where they live in the UK. Rishi Sunak's right, isn't he?
So let me unpick this. Keir's saying that he believes in devolution and the Scottish government and their right to determine their laws. That's the first underlying fact, and I think that's the right thing to do. We were the party of devolution, and it's right that we respect that. We're also the party that believes in the, gender ID, and that people should be given respect in that. But we also believe there should be a process around that, and we've been very clear on that. The current process is inhumane. It doesn't help people, it doesn't protect people, and it doesn't support people. We want to bring in a system that recognises that people can transition, but has those safeguards and protections in place and support, because people need support going through that process. And we've also recognised that under our legislation that the last Labour government brought in, under the equalities legislation, is that there is, safeguards around women-only spaces. And that's been consistent. And it's about the detail of how you get to that destination. But, we are protective of trans rights, we're protective of women's rights, and we're the party of equality, and have delivered in government and will deliver that in government again.
Finally, before we let you go, Angela Rayner, it's been reported Rishi Sunak attended a Taylor Swift concert on his holidays. You've, of course, been pictured DJing in the past. Are you a Swiftie?
I mean, I like a bit of Shake It Off. She's all right. I mean, the concert ticket prices are quite expensive these days. I was trying to get some for Coldplay for my 15-year-old son for after his GCSEs next year. So there are challenges in trying to get to concerts these days, but, good on him.
Well done for weaving cost of living into a question about music. Angela Rayner, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.